Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, why are there so many power struggles within professional cycling? We're also going to go double Dutch as we take a look back at the European Cyclocross Championships from the weekend. And that's exactly where we're going to start. The championships took place over the weekend in Silvel in Italy. Heavy rain on the run-up to the weekend had left the course looking as gloopy as anything you've ever seen. Check out this photo from under-23 Brit Cameron Mason, who forecast the slowest race in history. I think a slow race is one that I could beat you at, Cameron, if I'm perfectly honest. Organisers were forced to widen the track in places by moving the barriers, and with conditions drying up, it wasn't quite as bad as feared, but you couldn't exactly describe it as a fast course. Clearly relishing those conditions though was Jara Kastelein of the Netherlands. Took her just one lap to establish a lead, and whilst local favourite Eva Lechner was pushing her reasonably close for the rest of the race, Kastelein wasn't going to let go of her grip on the title, eventually crossing the line 12 seconds clear. Reigning champion Anne-Marie Verst would, in the end, have to settle for the bronze. Kastelein, as you can imagine, was absolutely delighted with her title, grinning from ear to ear in post-race interviews and saying that she's already achieved all of her season's goals. And to be fair, Lechner seemed just as happy to have won a silver medal on home soil. And there was a very sweet moment on the podium where she helped Kastelein open her champagne bottle, only for Kastelein to then soak her with it once it had popped. Now at 22, Kastelein is the youngest winner of the race since Marianne Vos in 2005. Vos, incredibly, was just 18 years of age then. Nevertheless, it is Kastelein who is this week's GCN Rider of the Week. And here's her reaction, not to our award, but to her win.
My coach said to me, okay, focus on the good lines, and I did, and now I'm here.
What's about your next goals?
I have all my goals actually already from this season. Yeah, it's incredible. And now I will focus on the world, I think.
In the men's race, world champion Mathieu Van der Poel slotted into second place from the start and barely moved from that spot, even as the riders ahead of him and behind him changed. What was hugely impressive was this acceleration around the first lap. Now, I am going to be talking about cycling's power struggles later on in the show, but the first of them is right here, Van der Poel versus Belgium. Now, it's quite easy to see who's getting the upper hand on this one, although it wasn't until late on the last lap that he was finally able to shake everybody off his wheel, with man of the season, Elie Iserbyt, the last rider to be able to stay in touch. In the end, the Belgian would have to settle for second place, 3 seconds behind Van der Poel, who took his third European title in a row in what is just his second race back this year. The third step of the podium went to Laurens Sweeck, also of Belgium. The first rider from outside of Belgium and the Netherlands, in fact, was Tom Pidcock, who took 8th place, whilst there was also a great ride by Felipe Orts-Lloret of Spain, who came 9th. And the only rider, in fact, I saw jumping the barriers was Lloret. In the under-23 men's race, Michael Crispin became the first French rider to win a European title at that level, and the first Frenchman to finish on the podium since Julien Alaphilippe back in 2012. The under-23 women's race was won by Kaylin Del Carmen Alvarado for the second year in succession, with Britain's Anna Kay continuing her rise up the ranks with second place. It was a bit of a surprise not to see Alvarado go for the elite title, especially given that she's already won 2 rounds of the Super Prestige this season, but this was her last opportunity in this category, and she didn't disappoint. The junior men's race was won by a name that you may well recognise, Nace. Thibaut Nace, son of Sven, arguably the greatest cross rider of all time. Pro riders, you had better watch out, he's coming. It could be quite something actually, as the career of Mathieu Van der Poel is likely to span from the last part of Sven's career into the first part of Thibaut's. Meanwhile, we had the first ever junior European Cyclocross Championship for women. It's been a long time coming, but thankfully it is here now. That race was won by Dutch national junior champion Puck Pieterse. Before we finish with cyclocross, another bit of news. 3-time world champions Dennis Stibar will return to cross again this winter, starting on December the 7th in Essen, then Zonhoven, St. Nicholas, Zolder, Bredena, Loenhout, Diegem and Bar. So 8 races in total, probably all mispronounced. Although, as he himself admits, it's going to be hard to compete with the best when he'll be starting most of those races from the back row of the grid. Anyway, this is the bike he'll be doing it on, a special custom specialised crux. Looks very nice, doesn't it? And I, for one, will be very interested to see how he gets on. Sven Nys always described Stibar as the rival he feared most during his career, but it's been a while since he was in World Championship winning form in this discipline. Now, moving on, last week after Filippo Ganna smashed the world record, I asked you if you thought whether the individual pursuit should be reinstated as an Olympic discipline. And the results of that poll, you could say, were pretty unanimous. The true cycling fans have spoken. Now, whether or not the UCI take note of that, I highly doubt, as they've got plenty of other things to be dealing with at the moment. It feels like there's never been more power struggles within the sport as there are right now. So first up, we have the AIGCP, which is an association who represent every men's professional cycling team from pro-continental level or above, except for Astana. Last week, they wrote an open letter to the UCI. It was long, it was detailed, and it was very critical. In essence, they claim that the UCI is not doing its job in governing the safety of the sport or correctly enforcing the rules, that they are interfering with the financial side of the sport, which they claim should not be within the UCI's remit as the world governing body, and that finally, the teams themselves are not consulted in the day-to-day decisions or long-term planning of professional road racing. Now, it's easy to cite some recent examples for each of those points. In September, Niels Elkoff was stripped of his title soon after he'd won the Under-23 World Championships in Harrogate, after UCI commissaires saw footage of him drafting behind his team car to return to the peloton after a crash early in the race. And then, far more serious than that, in October, young Dutchman Ido Mas was knocked off his bike in the Under-23 Il Lombardia by a car that had got onto the race route, and it's resulted in potentially life-changing injuries. Safety, as the AIGCP point out, should be right at the top of the list of priorities for the UCI to prevent anything like this ever happening again. And it's very easy to see why so many people are frustrated as commissaires are seen measuring riders' sock heights when such serious rider safety issues still exist. On the other hand, I'm absolutely sure that the UCI are prioritising rider safety. It's just that the media, and we're as guilty of this as anybody else, focus more on things like sock heights and don't ask the UCI what they are working on when it comes to rider safety. Now, of course, there's always more that can be done, but to think that the UCI is not concerned with safety or the well-being of the sport in general is simply not true. Then there is Velon, which confusingly is also a body that represents most of the top men's professional cycling teams. It's another stakeholder that is getting very frustrated. So they recently submitted an antitrust complaint to the European Commission, claiming that the UCI are using their power to block the business activities of Velon, primarily by hindering the development of the Hammer series, but also by trying to take control of onboard cameras and data, such as power numbers, which the teams and Velon claim is their own commodity. On top of that, they added an extra complaint last week for discriminating against women's cycling. This was after the UCI blocked a women's Hammer Series race that had been planned for Stavanger in Norway next year. That would have had exactly the same route, exactly the same timings and structure and prize money as the men's event which is due to take place. Further to that, the UCI upset the cyclo-cross world recently by announcing a shake-up to the World Cup series. That is now going to be 16 rounds, which will take place on consecutive weekends. Many of the sports stars, past and present, were critical of it. Amongst them, Sven Nys, who said he wasn't informed or consulted about the decision until it had been made, despite now being a registered team manager. And the list continues to go on and on. Bike manufacturers have their own gripes, saying that equipment rules from the UCI are stumping technological innovation. And then there are the race organisers. ASO, for example, the biggest race organiser of them all, came very close a few years ago to pulling all of their races from the World Tour in an argument about who should be choosing the participating teams for their races. More recently than that, race organisers were a big stumbling block for the UCI as they tried to get a 20-race classic series off the ground. That was set to incorporate all of the biggest one-day classics of the year into a season-long competition. In defence of the UCI, governing bodies of many other sports are in a similar situation, because when you make the rules, there will always be somebody that's upset with their implementation. You also have to remember that they are the governing body not just for professional road racing, but for other disciplines, from mountain biking to track to BMXing to cycling gymnastics and basically everything else in between. One of the big problems in our sport, though, are the sheer number of bodies and stakeholders who have a vested interest. The UCI, Velon, the AIGCP, the Riders' Unions, the CPA and the Cycling Alliance, ASO, RCS Sport, Flanders Classics, the Professional Cycling Council, and probably a whole load of other acronyms that I've just forgotten about. All of these stakeholders want to defend or grow their own interests within the sport to get a bigger piece of the pie. And actually, from a financial point of view, the pie really isn't that big. I mean, it's not football or baseball or basketball. this is cycling. Yes, riders earn good money, but TV rights are minuscule in comparison to those other sports, and even if those rights were shared amongst the teams, I think it's going to do very little to help their long-term financial sustainability. And to be honest, it's all a bit of a mess, really, isn't it? I love cycling, you love cycling, and we all want to see the sport thrive and to reach new fans who can also appreciate it just as we do. However, until we reach a point where everyone within the sport is working for a common goal and all trying to head in the same direction, united together, it's hard to see that happening. And that, given everything that I've just talked about, seems a long, long way off, doesn't it? At the moment, everybody is pulling in different directions and we're going nowhere very fast. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on this subject. If you've got any suggestions or even solutions to cycling's current power struggles, please let us know in the comments section just down below. Or maybe it doesn't even bother you at all and you're quite happy to appreciate the racing whilst letting the rest of them squabble behind the scenes. Either way, I would love to hear your thoughts. Right, I think I should move on now because there's plenty more racing coming up on the channel this week, and to let you know exactly what that is, I'm going to hand over to Marty.
Time to put some dates in the diary, everyone. Loads more live racing coming up this week. Make sure you subscribe to GCN Racing and hit that bell icon so that you get an alert every time we go live. On Saturday, it's the next round of the UCI Cyclocross World Cup from Tabor. Unfortunately, that's quite restricted, only available to a few territories in Europe. On Sunday, it's the DBB Trophy second round from Hammer. Live coverage worldwide except Belgium and the Netherlands. Same timings as Neil on that one. Van der Poel will continue his cross season against series leader Ellie Isabit, whilst newly crowned European champion Yara Castelline will hope to defend her lead in the women's series. Keep spreading the word about our live racing, which is massively appreciated. The more viewers we get on these races, the more likely we'll be able to keep bringing them to you, or hopefully even more. I'll see you soon.
We shall move on to transfer news now. One of the best sprinters of the current generation, Andre Greipel, has found a new home after breaking his contract with Arkea Samsic a year early. Last week, he revealed that he'll be moving to the Israel Cycling Academy next year, which I was quite surprised about actually, mainly because with the merger between that team and Katusha Alpecin, they were struggling to fulfil all of the contracts that had already been signed. Still, I really hope Andre gets back to his winning ways in 2020, because it'd be nice to see him end his career on a high. I was also very pleased to see Greipel's former teammate James Shaw step back up another level next year. Shaw was in the World Tour with Lotto Soudal at a very young age, but found himself back in the UK domestic scene this season. After some impressive riding at the Tour of Yorkshire and the Tour of Britain though, he's attracted the attention of a Pro Conti team, Rival Readiness, which is where he will be in 2020. One of the stars of the women's peloton this year, Lorena Wiebes, is apparently looking to move on from Park Hotels Valkenburg after her 15 wins this season. She took to Twitter actually to clarify the current situation, saying that she'd often been alone in the finales of the big races and that her newfound position as sprint favourite would put too much pressure on the team, which is, in essence, a very successful development squad. Pete Stettiner will step away from the World Tour at the end of the year, but not away from competing completely. He said that he's going to continue to race professionally in gravel and other alternative races. This year, Stettiner was second at the Dirty Kanza and won the Canyon Belgian Waffle Ride, which is another gravel endurance race. It does feel like there's been a recent shift in the way that you can earn money from riding a bike. With those events garnering a lot of publicity for sponsors, etc., it is now possible to earn money from the sponsors who want to get themselves a piece of that exposure. It does make you start to wonder, though, whether this is the end of gravel racing as we know it. That carefree adventure that was more about taking part than in competing. Will it get too serious and lose its soul as pro riders come across? Well, that's probably a subject for another show. Finally, all of us here at GCN would like to say a big get well soon to track sprint star Mathieu Glaetzer. He was diagnosed with thyroid cancer earlier on this month. Glaetzer had the cancerous lump removed almost as soon as it was diagnosed and still hopes to compete at next year's Olympics in Tokyo. Right, that is all for this week. Don't forget to tune in for our live racing over the weekend. We would dearly love to have your company. Now, for something a bit different and for a completely different kind of power struggle, why not watch this video from John Cannings, who went to explore the weird and wonderful world of British hill climb racing. You can find it just down here.